Hi, Joe Wise here from Shasta College, and I want to wish the League a happy 30th birthday. And you've been, as an organization, supporting our students and our staff for 30 strong years, and here's to the next 30.
It is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to the annual convention. I'm Karen Jimenez, Vice Chair of the League's Board of Directors and President of the California Community College Classified Senate, known as 4CS. Our mission is to support and develop the effective partnership of classified staff and governance, to support professional development of classified staff, and to serve as a liaison for our local classified senates. At this time, I invite Board of Governor President Tom Epstein to say a few words.
Good morning, and thanks for inviting me. After 2.5 years as president of the Board of Governors, my term ended yesterday. There was no recount, and we had a peaceful transfer of power. You know my successor well, Los Rios District Trustee Pam Haynes. She's had an awesome month, won 2 elections by overwhelming margins, and with her knowledge, passion, and diplomatic skills, she will make an outstanding leader of the board. On a personal note, serving as the president of the BOG was the greatest honor of my professional career. When I was appointed to the board, I knew little about the breadth and impact of the community college system. After 7 years of service and visiting more than 50 colleges, I understand how critical your institutions are to the future of our state. And as you all know, community colleges are the gateway to equity and opportunity for millions of Californians, as well as economic engines for dozens of communities. I am grateful for the dedication of the staff, faculty, and trustees, and inspired by the many students who overcome long odds to achieve their education and career goals. That said, there is room for improvement. Too many students spend years at our colleges and never finish their studies. Most who earn a degree have taken far more classes than they needed, and there are significant gaps in the achievement of people of color, as well as inequitable outcomes by region. Recognizing that a majority of our students are the first in their family to attend college and often face daunting challenges due to poverty, it's vital that our colleges are student ready. We must make it easier to navigate the system and provide more hands-on guidance to help them deal with academic, financial, and health concerns. In the past 4 years, working with the legislature, the governor, and all of you, we developed a framework to address these issues and accelerate the progress of our students. The Vision for Success set aggressive, equity-based goals, and full implementation of AB 705, guided pathways, and the student-centered funding formula will help to achieve those goals. While COVID and the resulting economic damage make our task more challenging, I'm encouraged by the focus on resilience at this conference. Our board and chancellor's office moved quickly to provide regulatory flexibility, resources, and training that colleges needed to make the unprecedented transition to online classes in a matter of weeks. It's a tribute to the dedication of college trustees, administrators, faculty, and staff that most students stayed enrolled and completed their spring semester. As the pandemic drags on, however, enrollment is declining at many colleges, so we must redouble our efforts to reach out to those who are struggling with the urgency that our students need and deserve. We are fighting for additional resources and are optimistic that the new administration in Washington will be helpful. Regardless, as our governor likes to say, we must step up and meet the moment. I'm sorry we can't be together in person this year, but I look forward to seeing you all again when we get to the other side. Thank you.
Thank you, President Epstein. The League again welcomes our community college affiliate organizations and businesses. The sessions sponsored by these partners ensure that the convention program is of the highest quality. Our session today is sponsored by our leadership corporate partners, RBC Capital Markets, Stifel, and Turnitin. RBC Capital Markets is a worldwide investment banking, sales, and trading group that includes one of the leading municipal finance organizations in the US. Since 1997, the firm has managed more than $3 billion in California community college bond issues. Much has changed since Stifel was founded 130 years ago, but their core values of integrity, client service, and on-the-market bond pricing remain the cornerstones of success. They serve the needs of California community colleges by underwriting financings for classroom facilities, student housing, and other key infrastructure projects and short-term financings for cash flow needs. For more than 20 years, Turnitin has partnered with educational institutions to promote honesty, consistency, and fairness. Their products are used by educators to guide their students towards higher standards of integrity and by students and researchers to do their best original work. Thank you to the League's leadership level corporate partners. We now turn to one of the most inspiring moments at each convention. Since 1964, we have honored distinguished alumni at our general sessions. The award is given to those who, through their start in a California community college, have achieved much and have gone on to make significant contributions to their communities and colleges. At this time, I'd like to introduce Luz Garcia, Hartnell College alum, physician assistant, Gonzalez Medical Center. As founder of Gonzalez Medical Center and a successful physician assistant, Luz Garcia is a highly respected California community college graduate for her contributions to healthcare in the Salinas Valley. Ms. Garcia's career was influenced by her desire to bring healthcare to underserved communities. In 2012, with only one practicing physician in Garcia's town, 1 in 5 residents did not have access to a regular physician or clinic for preventative and routine care. Pursuing a childhood dream, Garcia helped change that. Garcia's family worked as seasonal farm workers, and despite family burdens, she graduated from Hartnell College in 2004. After earning her degree, Ms. Garcia was unable to pursue her dream of medical school, but the only doctor in town helped train her, and she obtained a job at a community clinic. For a decade, the clinic served all those seeking medical care, including farm workers needing rehabilitation. The clinic was a distance from Garcia's town residents to travel. This led her to open the Gonzalez Medical Center. Garcia helped Monterey County's most underserved residents. She continues to advocate for local students to become medical professionals. Today, her town is one of a select few nationwide to win the prestigious Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Culture of Health Prize. Next, we will watch a short video from Luz Garcia.
I'm honored to have been nominated and selected as the recipient for the CCLC Distinguished Alumni Award. First and foremost, I'm grateful to God for my education and career. I'm thankful for the existence of the community college system and their faculty and staff that made access to higher education possible. The community college faculty and staff played a major role in making it possible for me to further my education and serve my community as a medical professional. The existence of a community college system certainly allowed me to further my education despite adversity and obstacles that I had to overcome as a teenager. Hartnell College allowed me to continue to further my education and pursue my career in the medical field. Thanks to the existence of Hartnell, I was able to achieve my academic and career goal. As a Latina woman living in East Salinas and coming from an ag-working family whose priority was not education, being first generation and faced with a teenage pregnancy, the odds to continue in education beyond high school were against me. Despite a teenage pregnancy and being a mother of a premature son, my senior year in high school, I was able to graduate from high school with honors. In high school, I was faced with a dilemma. I had been accepted to UC Berkeley, UC Davis, UC San Diego, and UC Santa Barbara, but had a premature baby that I couldn't leave behind. With the lack of support from my husband to move to Berkeley and having a premature baby that I couldn't leave behind, and not knowing about deferred admissions, I declined the full ride to UC Berkeley. I had to turn down that full ride to stay home and take care of my premature baby. Luckily, Hartnell College was there for me. I enrolled in Hartnell and continued to pursue my goal of becoming a medical professional. Having gone to community college allowed me to transfer and pursue a degree at UC Santa Cruz in biology. I graduated from UC Santa Cruz with a bio degree, went to UC Davis, took grad level classes there, and furthered my education. Subsequently, I attended the Stanford University Family Practice PA program. My education has allowed me to be able to be in the position to deliver healthcare to the underserved community in a rural healthcare clinic. I saw the need for affordable healthcare and ultrasound services in the community and founded a family practice clinic and ultrasound center. I am currently the CFO founder of Gonzalez Medical Center and Ultrasound Center, where we help deliver preventive medicine, acute illness and chronic illness management, and ultrasound services. As a family practice PA, I have been in the position to make a difference in my community by helping patients to access to affordable medical health care. In addition, as a PA, I'm in the capacity to help mentor and provide internship sites for students. I work with local educational institutions and provide internships for a medical pathway. I'd like to encourage faculty and staff to continue to support and advocate for your students. Even though we come from humble beginnings, given the opportunity, we can make a difference in our community as professionals. Continue to support your students and encourage them to continue to pursue their educational goals despite their adversity and problems that they face while pursuing their goal. Thank you, Hartnell College and staff, for your work and support. Thanks to the community college system, I am here today as a medical professional receiving this award. I accept this award on behalf of other students like me that struggled against all odds to receive a higher level education, but made it. Thank you.
Congratulations, distinguished alumna Luz Garcia. Now we move on to our panel discussion. Here with us today are members of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Work Group, known as DEI, to share the call to action for the implementation of the DEI plan. From the Chancellor's Office, panel facilitator, Deputy Chancellor Dr. Daisy Gonzalez, panelists representing the California Community College Trustees, Palomar College Trustee Mark Evilsizer, representing the Academic Senate of the California Community Colleges, immediate past president Dr. John Stanskis, representing the Chief Executive Officers of California Community Colleges, Imperial Valley College Superintendent and President Dr. Martha Garcia, and representing the Association of Chief Human Resource Officers, San Diego Community College District, Vice Chancellor of Human Resources, Gregory Smith. Welcome to the convention. Before I turn the session over to Dr. Gonzalez, please be sure to type your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen so that they can be answered after the panel discussion is concluded. I now turn the session over to Deputy Chancellor Dr. Daisy Gonzalez.
Thank you, Karen. And while my colleague Greg Smith pulls up our PowerPoint, I'll start with some opening remarks. First, good morning, League Conference colleagues. Happy birthday, League. I want to start by thanking the incredible League team and Lair Galizio for his leadership during this very difficult year, and all of you for joining us for this general session. My name is Dr. Gonzalez, and I'm the Deputy Chancellor of the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office, but I'm also the proud co-founder of the California Community Colleges Women's Caucus, the newest member of the League family. I begin this presentation with a lot of gratitude to all of you. It has been an unimaginable year, but we have so much to celebrate even in this difficult year. The speed at which you rallied to serve your students in the middle of a pandemic and providing them emergency supports, food, and rapid technology resources. And yes, we know that there is more need, and you have not given up. You continue to deploy resources and seek partners. Second, the speed at which you have continued to serve your communities as the epicenter of hope. You serve as hospital sites, poll sites, emergency fire sites, and that's not by accident. You are the hearts of your communities. And lastly, well before this pandemic, you broke a record in 2019-20, you shattered the Vision for Success goal number 1 by increasing degree and certificate attainment by 20%. Of course, we now know that many of those students had to defer their dreams, to transfer, or to start their careers during this pandemic, but that's where we all come in. As educational leaders, one of our top 3 jobs, if not the number 1 job that we have, is to keep hope alive. And as a part of that work, I believe that we must have honest and courageous conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we must continue to lead in service of student success. I'm not alone today. I have the honor of presenting with a diverse team of statewide stakeholders, Dr. John Stanskis, Dr. Marta Garcia, Trustee Mark Evilsizer, and Gregory Smith, and I will introduce them shortly with a small bio. But with us today is also the commitment of the Board of Governors and Chancellor Oakley, the passion of the statewide DEI implementation work group and the subcommittees that they have empowered, and most importantly, the courage of many of you who are here joining us who have carried this work for many years. Next slide, please. Today, during our time together, we invite you to learn with us. We'll walk through some key pieces of background very quickly, and then we will transition straight into our phenomenal panel and hopefully end with some Q&A. Next slide. We do want to provide you 2 caveats. The first is that we know that many of us are still learning. The second one is that this presentation is not meant to be a complete history of all activities in progress to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. Instead, we invite you to help us identify future opportunities for integration and coordination. Next slide. Now in year 3 of the implementation of Vision for Success, you've all adopted local goals that align to this work. As a part of that journey, you have had to deconstruct and rebuild systems that we all have inherited. Time and time again, you have proven that when we can come together, we create a new baseline for what progress looks like. And we can change culture and we can rectify historical wrongdoings. As we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we begin this conversation, we must first acknowledge that this work does not exist in isolation. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is integrated into each goal of the Vision for Success and into each commitment of the Vision for Success. I highlight this because our diversity, equity, and inclusion and the panelists that you have today highlighted that piece statewide. And they believed in 2018 that this work needed to be integrated for 4 key reasons. First, faculty and staff diversity is a primary lever for increasing student achievement. Second, diversity impacts students and employee retention. Third, faculty and staff diversity reduces the likelihood of implicit bias. And fourth, faculty and staff diversity increases the ability to integrate multicultural and culturally responsive pedagogy into teaching practices. Next slide, please. As a part of our journey as a task force, and what's important for you today is that we also had to acknowledge the historical context of our history, of our state, and of ourselves as a public work site. And our history is rooted in discrimination and violence against different racial and ethnic groups throughout history. In fact, American universities and colleges were connected to the slave trade. Scholars believed in racial inferiority and argued for the centrality of slavery to the nation's economic success. Quota systems were used to keep Black and African American students out of colleges and universities. And throughout history, the lives of people of color, women, and other marginalized groups have been negotiated in courts. Roberts v. City of Boston, 1849, Jim Crow laws, 1881, Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896, Mendez v. Westminster, 1947, Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And not too long ago, in our system, 85% of our entire system was placed into 1 or more levels below transfer level math and English. This policy of remedial education is a part of our history. But when we know better, we have to do better. Next slide. I know that we're all in different parts of our learning journey, But I need this to sink in. We are not in a post-racial society. We had 339 years of slavery, 89 years of formal and overt discrimination and violence, and now 66 years to rebuild and create a culture where informal and covert forms of discrimination are eradicated. And so our work continues. Next slide. This is the history that the diversity, equity, and inclusion had to wrestle with. How do we move forward? And how do we use what we have learned to help transform our institutions to be student ready and to be anti-racist institutions? Ultimately, that task force decided that 68 recommendations needed to be implemented to help our institutions become equal employment opportunity sites and to help advance student success. And yes, we looked at the data. Next slide. But what we found was that it didn't matter how we slice and dice the data. Community college students are still the most diverse student population in any college. 76% of our students are students of color. Next slide. And the data was problematic because of our education code and regulatory requirements related to equal employment opportunity. And our analysis also showed that the lack of diversity was also a part of our senior leadership, including leadership at the Chancellor's office. The task force recommendations were documented in this report and submitted to the governor. Next slide. And what we sent to the governor was a summary of the resources that it would take for us to make a difference, for us to mobilize our DI framework. We also shared our deep commitment to transform our culture and to help our students succeed. But we have to be honest with ourselves. Money alone will not fix this issue. To do that, we must act to transform our culture. And this requires us to move from compliance to empowerment. We need 3 types of action. Institutions need to adopt overarching policies and a philosophy that accepts responsibility for the well-being of workers. We do this through our mission statements, regulations, and policies. Departments need to change their interactions to adopt a culture that is inclusive and takes responsibility for department climate and cultural competency of colleagues. And the most difficult realm to impact change in, the individual realm. This requires all of us as colleagues in every single campus and office to take action to support DEI goals and be willing to learn and mentor others. Next slide. In the middle of this pandemic and this work, the murder of George Floyd and the civil unrest impacted every single community. Whether we were ready or not, whether you were a part of the statewide task force, we were called to take immediate action. The Chancellor will cover the call to action in detail tomorrow during the State of the System address. So I only will cover number 2, host campus and open dialogue to address campus climate. Next slide. Within the context of our conversation today, we did host a webinar titled Nurturing an Anti-Racist Campus Culture. As a part of the dialogue that we need to have across every single campus and district in this community, one of the number 1 things that we need to do is to develop and embrace common language. It is the only way that we can have productive conversations. So let me walk you through 4 key terms out of 47 terms that were developed by this DEI task force to be deployed statewide that can help us have a productive conversation today. And then I'm going to introduce our speakers. Next slide. Our first term is diversity. Diversity affirms that everyone in every group should be valued. It is not about understanding these differences and moving beyond simple tolerance. Instead, embracing and celebrating the rich dimensions of our differences. In short, diversity is not about being tolerated. Instead, it is around being respected and valued. Next slide. Equity is the condition under which individuals are provided the resources they need to have access to the same opportunities as the general population. Equity accounts for systemic inequalities, meaning the distribution of resources provides more for those who need it the most. Next slide. Anti-racist, within this context, is a powerful collection of anti-racist policies that lead to racial equity and are substantiated by anti-racist ideas. Practicing anti-racism requires constantly identifying, challenging, and appending existing racist policies and replacing them with anti-racist policies that foster equity between racial groups. And our final term, anti-racist, a person who actively opposes racism and the unfair treatment of people who belong to other races. They recognize that all racial groups are equal, i.e., there is nothing inherently superior or inferior about specific racial groups, and that racist policies have caused racial inequalities. They also understand that racism is pervasive and has been embedded into all societal structures. An anti-racist challenges the values, structures, policies, and behaviors that perpetuate systemic racism. And they are also willing to admit times in which they have been racist. Next slide. These terms will be key as a part of the work that you'll hear some of our panelists talk about. The 68 recommendations include DEI work that has been advancing over the last 6 months, specifically reviewing our hiring processes as a system, reviewing our campus climate, the deployment of professional development, designing mentorship models statewide for faculty and staff, and the coming soon changes to the equal employment opportunity plans and the allocation formula. Next slide. That concludes our background. I will now introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Trustee Mark Evilsizer. He has served students of Palomar College since 2002 and has dedicated his time to statewide service through the CCT board. Most recently, he served in the DEI implementation work group as one of three trustees appointed by CCT President Adrian Gray. Our second panelist is Dr. Marta Garcia, Superintendent President of Imperial Valley College, the first woman to lead the college, and most recently, she launched her Tiny Homes project to help homeless students in her community. She's a graduate of Imperial Valley College, and in her spare time, she has dedicated the last 3 years to help us design a DEI framework for our system. She currently serves in the DEI implementation work group as one of 3 appointed CEOs by Board President Pamela Luster. Our third panelist is Gregory Smith. He's the Vice Chancellor of Human Resources for the San Diego Community College District. Before his transition to San Diego, he served the students of Shasta Tehama Trinity CCD. He has been a dedicated leader in the statewide EEO and Diversity Advisory Committee and is a key member of the DEI implementation work group representing ACRO. And finally, Dr. John Stanskis. He's the immediate past president of the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges and currently serves as the ASCCC representative for DEI. For many years, he served the students of San Bernardino Valley College as a chemistry professor and local Senate leader. Dr. Stanskis has been an unapologetic leader for DEI. In fact, he led this work as the co-chair of the DEI task force in 2018. We owe him a great amount of acknowledgement for helping us get here today. With that, panelists, let's get started with our first question. Greg, if we can stop sharing the slides, we'll come back to it. Our first question, panelists, and we'll start with you, Trustee Evilsizer. Our first question is, how can CEOs and trustees lead DEI in California's community colleges?
Well, thank you for that question, Dr. Gonzalez. I feel the trustees' role in our community colleges includes policy and fiduciary responsibility. And our role as trustees in this DEI work is to adopt a DEI lens when reviewing and approving policies and procedures, to look for equity when we develop our budgets and give our budget approvals, to be role models and courageous change agents in this work. And I strongly recommend that the trustees and CEOs on this call request that DEI be added as a regularly scheduled agenda item at your monthly board meetings, because I think it shows to the constituent groups on our campuses that this is a high priority. The bar is high for DEI, and we want to be able to monitor monthly progress within the institution and get everybody involved, because empowerment of our constituent groups is vital in this work. And then it's important for us to partner with our CEOs, empower them to lead the DEI integration effort within your district. Be sure to back them up with support. This is hard work. And be sure to hold them accountable for results as well.
Thank you, Mark. President Garcia, what are your thoughts to that question?
Thank you very much. Before I start, I want to make sure that I also thank the League for providing us the opportunity to talk to you all today, and this space, a space that really requires courage. If we're going to have a dialogue, a sincere dialogue about our commitment to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion, frankly, it starts with courage. So with courage and with support of the trustees and the entire campus community. Us as CEOs have the opportunity to, one, create our goals, our annual goals or biannual goals, and set our priorities aligned with them. But it is important that we recognize that this work cannot be achieved alone, that it takes the entire campus community and the support of the trustees as partners to move this agenda forward, to move through transformation. And yes, we have specific opportunities to support the work. We have the opportunity to allocate resources, and we also, aligned with our goals and priorities, have the opportunity to create action plans on our sites where we are holding ourselves accountable, but also ensuring that we are providing information continuously to the trustees and to the campus as to the progress being made. Ultimately, as CEOs, we do the work that we do for to contribute to the success of our students, and this is a priority that will contribute to student success. Thank you.
Thank you, President Garcia. I think we hear over and over again just the amount of leadership that we'll need and support from our CEOs and our trustees. President Stanskis or John, what are you hearing from faculty?
So I really appreciate the League taking the opportunity to highlight this session and prioritize this work. And I think that the question is, how can CEOs and trustees help lead this work? And I think that the first thing we can do is set the tone. I think we're asking our trustees and our CEOs to set the tone that this is an important conversation and it takes a vulnerability to have that conversation. If you just think historically, my college went through a whole transformation, lots of new buildings, and we found contracts in yearbooks from the 1920s in California. And the contract actually stated that women could be hired as faculty until the term in which they were married, and then they must resign because that was inappropriate. The pictures were all in black and white, but it was very clear there are no Black or African American faculty or students, and there were no Latinx faculty or students. And here's my train, because I am also working from home. I apologize. It takes a vulnerability to look at that and say, well, that was so long ago. But in order to actually examine some of these processes and say, things did not go right in the past, and we have to change that. We have the power to change that. We need our trustees to empower our CEOs and our academic senate to actually create a change and to create a space where we can be vulnerable enough to say, there are racist structures in this system. I have had racist ideas before because of society, and now we need to examine that and do the work to move forward. So I think that's what I would ask of trustees. I apologize for the training.
No worries. Greg, same question. How can CEOs and trustees support this work?
Thank you, Daisy, and I appreciate the comments from Trustee Evilsizer and from Dr. Garcia and Dr. Stancis, because what I distill that down to in direct action is the most simple thing that a trustee can do is at a board meeting, ask the leadership of the different constituencies at the district, what are we doing to advance diversity, to create an environment where equity can be achieved, and to ensure that inclusion is happening. And by asking our chancellors and presidents, our members of cabinet, our academic senate presidents, our union leaders, that direct question, if nothing's being done at the moment, I assure you at the very next meeting, they will come ready to talk about what we're starting to do. Because as soon as you communicate that this is a priority and that you're going to be asking that question, we know very clearly we need to get to work. And I think that's the most simple action that a trustee can take. For our CEOs, our chancellors, and our presidents, I echo what has been said. It's the support for that work. It's the resources that we need to go out and actualize this work. It's the follow through and the commitment at a leadership level to communicate out to everyone in the district, this is important, this is essential, and this will be done. And if it's not done, then we're going to look to make the changes needed to get it done. And when that message is loud and clear and the follow through is there, it becomes a lot easier to get this work done, to engage with those who may not see its importance yet, and create the importance and then move forward.
Thank you, Greg. Our second question relates to a comment that Dr. Garcia already mentioned, which is we don't do this alone. It is just simply not possible. So our second question, many of you have been involved in this work for 1 or 3 years. So we've been working on this. You are working on this now. Can you walk us through what is your organization that you are representing here today currently working on to advance this work? And what should CEOs and trustees know about that work? Let's start with you, Greg.
Yeah, so ACRO has been involved in EEO, diversity, equity, and inclusion work really since its inception. It's part of our title as an organization. The full name is ACRO EEO. And so what we're doing right now, the 3 main objectives currently are to work with our Chancellor's Office partners and our system partners on revisions to Title V that would allow this work to move forward more intently. Then to advocate for the resources that the system needs so that we can do this effectively. And then directly to work with, to collaborate with our cooperative partners on changes that we can make in the way we recruit, the way that we hire, and the conditions of employment once someone's hired that will lead to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've organized ourselves into 10 work groups addressing different aspects of this, from the way that we market and advertise and draw people in to apply for our jobs, to the criteria that we're using in determining who's most qualified, to the interview questions we ask, all the way through to how do we retain, what kind of programs are ensuring inclusion, and then how do we get information from people when they choose to leave us in exit interviews, and analyzing that data so that we can learn about ourselves and really focus into where we can make changes in the way that we do our employment processes that will increase inclusion and will lead to sustainable diversity, not just in diversifying our applicant pools, but truly having a more diverse workforce. And in doing that work, we're proud to be partnering with members of the CCCT, with Academic Senate, with the Student Senate, with our union partners, presidents, CIOs. We've had some great partnerships through those work groups already started.
Thank you, Greg. Trustee Evilsizer, I know you're also doing a lot of work empowering many different subcommittees, and you have a panel coming up on Friday. Same question.
Yes, we do. The CCCT board, California Community College Trustees Board, has been assigned 10 specific tasks. 8 of them are tier 1 tasks which required that we have them completed within a 6 to 12 month period. And the start of that was like July or August of this year. The other two tasks are tier 2, and we have 1 to 2 years to operate within a completion for those. But the tasks have been assigned to 4 trustee DEI work groups. Work group number 1 is dealing with workforce data and diversity hiring. Task Force 2 or Work Group 2 is working on mission statements, EEO plans, and celebrating diversity within our system. Work Group 3 is looking at professional development and mentoring. And Work Group 4 is working on the exit interviews and faculty evaluations that take place at each of our campuses. So that's some of the work that we've started.
And a lot of that work is also being done in partnership with the Academic Senate, Dr.
ACRO,
and ACRO, and all of the other colleagues.
CEOs, yep, a lot of collaboration.
Dr. Stainskis, what about the Academic Senate?
So the Academic Senate has partnered with the Chancellor's Office for several years now to prioritize and highlight our work around DEI. I think the things that are most important for trustees include the hiring modules that we have put out in collaboration with ACRO and the CIOs and the CEOs of the state to try to start to examine what those hiring processes look like, because it is the responsibility of the Academic Senate to make recommendations to our CEOs and trustees around that. And so we've taken that work very seriously, and I know ACRO is improving that model for us from their lens, which is important to move forward as well. Our statewide organization, the Academic Senate, has worked to provide professional development resources to local academic senates, a call to action to academic senates to start with agendizing the conversation and an examination of curriculum, both, which is hard. Those are hard things to do, to have those conversations. I noticed in the Q&A, and I'm having trouble managing both of those at the same time and listening, but there's a couple questions about how we can make someone do something. You can't make someone realize or become aware. What you can do is create this space where this is a topic of conversation, and it's a space that's safe enough that people are allowed to screw up and say the wrong thing and move on and recognize that. And that's hard work to do. And that is something I think the trustees really, with the tone that they set and the questions that they ask, can really help with how we prioritize that. And most recently at the fall plenary session just a couple weeks ago, the delegates from all of your colleges adopted the anti-racism paper about how academic senates can help create a more anti-racist institution from their role.
Dr. Garcia, we also know that a lot of this work is around setting the right tone in your campus, your mission statement, the way that a CEO sets expectations at every realm. How are the CEOs organizing around this work statewide?
First and foremost, the CEO board, which is led by Dr. Pam Lester, has made diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority. And secondly, there are, as stated by Dr. Gonzalez, 3 CEOs, including myself, serving on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Implementation Task Force. And finally, I'm really proud and privileged to serve on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusive Excellence Task Force, along with 16 other CEO colleagues. And we have formed 6 work groups. And our next steps is to meet with the various stakeholders who are working on the strategies that we are responsible for as well. And we look forward to the collaboration. We are definitely committed and looking forward as we all evolve collectively through a transformative process. Thank you.
All right, panelists, those are the easy questions. I think it's time to pivot. We are going to need to demystify how difficult this work actually is. I want to bring in some of the questions in the Q&A box. Marginalization of students, of classified staff. How do you bring in and help someone acknowledge their privileges? So our third question is really this. Help us demystify this work. What has been the hardest part of leading this DEI work? And to the extent possible, help us with an idea, like how do we move past that difficult barrier? So I'm going to let you ponder that, and I'm going to ask John to get us started.
So I think recognizing that the task is challenging and creating that safe space requires a lot of background work. So anyone in a leadership role has to provide that space for honest dialogue. I think, though, that it can be done, that an examination of one's own institution sometimes requires a recognition that the way things are done now and the way things happen were choices of somebody else. Nobody in the room, nobody on the trustee board now made some choices about how this moves forward, and that it's okay to do things differently. And getting past that is important. I think also Dr. Gonzalez and I started doing some presentations with the Academic Senate statewide at the beginning. And it was pretty nerve-wracking because there was a sense of attack. I think people felt attacked when we said, the structure is racist. People said, you're calling me racist. And I really hope that all of these participants here today don't feel that. But that's the first part. That's the first part we have to get over is just because I acknowledge that I have a system of privilege that exists doesn't mean that I am calling anyone out in particular. And that's what I mean by a safe space. And the best way to do that is to lead by example. And so I found it was very disarming to start with saying, you know, I have privilege because I am white. I have privilege because I am male. I have privilege because people who don't know me might think I'm straight, right? That would be wrong, but you could imagine that comes with some privilege. It doesn't discount my life experiences. It doesn't mean that I don't have something of value to contribute, but my value is not any different than anybody else's value. And so sometimes being able to say that is a way to bring the room together. And so I think that's the hardest part, is making the first leap, getting that first conversation going and not knowing where it's going to go and not knowing if anything's going to happen, but taking that leap out and allowing oneself to be vulnerable in front of your peers or subordinates or superiors is the place to start. And I think all of you are trustees and CEOs. You're all strong enough to do it. You can do it. You've done a lot.
You
right?
ran for office.
Yeah, this is not enough. You are strong enough to do it.
John, we were hoping it was going to be like a magic potion or a pill, but it's not. Thanks. But no, in all seriousness, Dr. Garcia, I'm wondering in your response if you could also help us demystify Prop 16 and the relationship to 209 and how this work originally started. So no pressure.
Oh, well, it's, yeah, Prop 16, obviously, there was different perspectives, right? And the commitment for it to advocate for some of us to advocate and advocate for it, knowing why it was important for it to pass. Definitely controversial. We thought we were ready, but frankly, according to the results, we were not. I just want to also convey that from the CEO standpoint, demystifying why has this work been difficult is the fact that we must acknowledge that we're at different levels of awareness and knowledge, and that we work in communities with different political climates, and that we may be working, even if we believe wholeheartedly that this is the right thing to do for students, that we may be working with some colleagues that don't believe it. That's difficult. From a personal standpoint, what has been the most difficult for me is the pain, the anger, the feelings that were felt as we saw society go through civil unrest and stand up, which has also created a sense of urgency. And it is with that sense of urgency that we're trying to move forward, but it hasn't been easy, and it will not be easy. Frankly, if any of us here today express that we thought this is not complex, that this work is not at times painful to acknowledge, and when you see especially when we translate this to the success of our students, and especially those that we are not doing enough for, you know, I would be dishonest. So we move forward, committed, as I stated earlier, and acknowledging that we will support each other, but yet continue acting with a sense of urgency, and ensuring that concrete actions are set in order to keep ourselves accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Trustee Evilsizer, what has been the hardest part of leading this work?
You know, I want to build on what Martha, Dr. Garcia was saying. 2020 has been a hard year. I mean, we started out with a global pandemic that's led to an economic collapse. We've got shuttered businesses, people shuttered in their homes, working from home, which has some pluses. But there's a lot of anger and protests over social injustice and racial inequalities. And look at all of the protests that erupted in our major cities here in the United States. But I think Americans have been awakened by these injustices of systemic racism. There's a national call to action. The community colleges, our chancellor, our board of governors have urged us to get on with this DEI work, to look and eliminate oppressive policies, eliminate those processes and systems in our institutions that discriminate and oppress and hold people down. And so 2020, I think, has been something of a spark to help us accelerate and do this work with urgency, like Dr. Garcia said. I think there's some bright spots too at our institutions. I know where I'm a trustee, Palomar Community College District, our leadership and constituent groups have taken ownership of DEI, and they're integrating it into all areas of our institution. One of the hard things at the state level and at our CCCT work group level has been getting our part-time volunteers that are serving on the DEI work groups to accelerate their work. It's slow to me. I come from a corporate environment, and man, if you don't act quickly, you could be out of the marketplace quickly with something. So, we tended to accelerate things, and it's a little different, I think, with this DEI work that we're doing. But there's a lot of bright spots. I know I wanted to call out Compton College because I think they've done an outstanding job in integrating DEI throughout their institution, and it's been organic. Their constituent groups have each embraced this and developed a buy-in and a commitment to doing the work, to getting the training, to help the students. And so there's a lot of bright spots, but it's hard work and it's slow, but we're plugging away.
Thank you, Trustee Evilsizer. I just recently saw an article online and it said, a tree doesn't grow from the top. And I think that's a really good metaphor for the work that we're talking about here, right? I see a lot of questions around how do we include student voices? Do you believe students should have a voting right in a board? Those are your local community discussions. And that's what we meant by we're learning together. And that's why this general session is so important, because the group here will not transform your community. We will deploy best practices, but we need trustees and CEOs to have those honest conversations. And what we will say is our student senate is not going to wait for us. They developed their own anti-racist plan of action, and they are urging for they want us to decolonize curriculum. They want additional resources and support. This work is moving forward. And that's very important. When Dr. Garcia talks about urgency, all of this work needs to be synergized with that courage that we need in this real moment. And then the real policy changes that are happening behind the scenes. And a lot of them are being led by ACRO. But Greg, what has been the hardest part of leading this work from your perspective?
It was last week I heard our chancellor here in San Diego, Dr. Constance Carroll, say that the racial tension is not a new thing. Racial oppression is not a new thing. What's different about this moment is we've had people in key leadership positions give voice and give some endorsement to people who oppose the idea of racial equality, who are explicitly racist. And so it's raised the level of discourse and conflict to an unhealthy place. And you mentioned some of the legal framework that we're working from. As a society, we seem to be comfortable legally with the idea of equal access, of everybody gets to come through the front door. We've not reached a place, as evident in the defeat of Prop 16, where we're interested in looking at outcomes. Who succeeds in accomplishing their objectives? And so trying to push that forward when we have legal frameworks that do present some barriers to that becomes a challenge, thinking specifically in human resources and how do we create a hiring system where we prioritize candidates who can successfully serve the diversity of our system. And we have a system that grew up in a time period when it was perfectly legal to say, if you are not white, you don't get to come here, where it was not just legal, but socially accepted to do that. And not just socially accepted, but there was pressure from your peers if you tried to defy those standards. And so we have to recognize that that is our past, but our current status is we're serving a student population that is nearly 70% Black, Indigenous, and people of color, with a system that was developed, with many features that came out of that system of racism. And that is difficult when the legal framework doesn't necessarily support it. So we have to be creative and innovative to think beyond that, to seize this opportunity, to engage with our colleagues who haven't experienced diversity, who haven't seen why Black, Indigenous, and people in color are experiencing our world, our community, and our educational system in a very different way than I did.
Thank you, Greg. And that includes, I know a key part of the work that this task force has done is also advocating for the inclusion of students in the hiring processes, and that has been supported by many different stakeholders. I want to transition us to the action. I asked you all, what could we do immediately as a part of this general session? So I'm going to ask Greg for you to share our screen, and then Mark is going to bring us to the end. Before we get there, though, I do want to be clear. This work started despite 209 being a part of this state. That was in 2018. We will not use the failure of Prop 16 as an excuse. This work will continue. This work is a part of the urgency of what you need to do as leaders in this system to help your students succeed. They do not feel that the institutions that we are currently operating are meeting their needs. And that is what they are calling us to action to do. Trustee Evilsizer, this is our League Conference Challenge. Would you like to walk us through it on how we can get to immediate action today, right now, in 2 minutes?
Yes. The first call for action is number one there. Take 3 minutes to send an email to your CEO, your faculty senate president, or your relevant VP of Academic Affairs or HR, and ask for an update of how you can help. And there's some sample text provided there, but this is meant to get this question on the radar screen of our leadership at our colleges. So take 3 minutes and do that with an email. Secondly, we're asking that by June 30th of next year, 2021, that each of us commits to introducing and passing a DEI resolution in our institutions, in our communities. So a sample resolution link is provided there under 2. And finally, everyone, we all need to ask good questions around data. And for trustees, be sure, again, that you analyze those budgets and EEO plans with a DEI lens. And keep in mind, too, that students are demanding action. They're moving forward with or without us. There's an anti-racism plan that the Student Senate has issued. They're asking to be included on committees for hiring faculty, providing evaluations for their classroom experience with DEI, both for their instructor and these types of things. So they're asking for more empowerment too. And remember, they're going to become the leaders in our institutions tomorrow.
Thank you, Trustee Evilsizer. I know our last question was supposed to be, why do you believe in this work? Why do you believe this is possible? I want you guys to take maybe 10 seconds each, because I think it's important for this audience to see, while this may be difficult work, while this is a long game, while there's a lot of urgency, why you refuse to give up. So let's start with Dr. Garcia.
I believe in this work because as a proud daughter of farm workers, a first-generation college graduate, the first female superintendent president for Imperial Valley College, these dreams that I've achieved would have not occurred if an opportunity was not granted, if someone didn't believe in me and supported me and guided me. And this is what I envision for all our students. They could achieve any dreams that they aspire to achieve. Thank you.
Trustee Evilsizer.
I think friction produces heat, and heat can create energy and change. And 2020 is disruptive, but I think we need to change and re-engineer our oppressive policies, systems that exist in our institutions. They're there. We need to look for them, root them out, and replace them.
Dr. Stanskis.
10 seconds is a little hard, Daisy. Sorry, Dr. Gonzalez. So I believe that we can do this work because we have to. I believe in the interior sense of fairness that everyone has. And because I have 2 children, let me tell you just this little tiny story about my daughter, who 3 years ago went with me to Washington, D.C. with you all at the League, and we met Kamala Harris. We met Kamala Harris because my daughter bum rushed her when she was coming out of her office. We did not have a scheduled meeting, and she was dying for a picture with her. And she was a lovely woman, and she took some time to talk to my daughter and took a picture. And the fact that we had to get that picture blown up and put on the wall because my daughter now believes that she could do something like that she could be in that position when In 6th grade, she showed me the picture of all of the previous presidents and said, clearly she could not.
Thank you, John.
That's why this is important.
Thank you. Greg, bring us home and then we'll hand it back to Karen.
We are preparing students for a diverse world, a socially complex world, a culturally diverse world. And if we're going to deliver on that mission, we have to do it by diversifying our workforce, by creating an environment of equity and inclusion. Our students can feel the culture of our institutions as they interact with it. And if we have faculty of color who aren't able to participate fully in curriculum community, in curriculum committees because they're being told that ethnic studies isn't as rigorous of an academic discipline as traditional English literature programs. Our students are going to feel that and they are going to suffer for it. I've read so many of the mission statements of our districts around the state, and virtually all of them talk about how we are preparing our students to be successful financially, intellectually, their health outcomes in a diverse and complex society. And so it's imperative, if we're going to meet our mission, that we create this in our workforce. And so I believe we have to and we can.
Thank you, panelists. Back to you, Karen.
Thank you. This is such an exciting conversation, and it's just the start. And I love the idea that we can all serve as mentors to each other and be change agents. And I have to say, I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and this session reminded me that we were encouraged throughout that time to continuously assess our lenses during our service, and not only during our time in our country, but also when we return home. So I'm really excited about this conversation. And a huge thank you to all of you today, today's panelists, as well as the other members of the DEI work group, for your hard work for our students and our college communities. So please enjoy our upcoming sessions at 12:30. Got a 20-minute break for lunch, and 1:30. Daily caucus sessions are at 2:30 and 3:45. During breaks and lunch, you will have an opportunity to attend corporate partner mini sessions and get your questions answered. Session Zoom links and passwords are available in the event app and will be emailed out daily. All sessions will be recorded and released after the convention concludes. Please complete your session and convention evaluations available in the event app. We encourage you to use the web browser version of our event app and keep it open during the day to receive updates about the convention. Enjoy these excellent sessions available this afternoon, and the session is adjourned.